to start off, what we were just talking about before I started recording is your power of social media. You're one of the most active coaches, at least to my knowledge, for college tennis on social media. You do a lot of live Instagrams, kind of talking to different people from different backgrounds in the tennis world. So how did you start coming up with the idea of getting more involved with Instagram and socials for that matter?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think there's a couple of factors. First of all, I'm fairly young. I'm 33 years old, so I think it helps to comprehend and embrace social media once you're part of it already. I think it was a push also internally from the players. I think every tennis player out there loves to be tagged in the picture, love to be tagged in the video, reshare, and repost and retweet and whatnot. So I think there was also a goal to promote our own brand. And I think it became fun. I think it became fun for us to, share what we do, share how we do it, talk about tennis in general. And then for me personally, I think there is also the aspect of learning, really learning when I talk to you, when I talk to anybody in the tennis industry, and beyond. I've done wheelchair tennis, I've done pickleball and strength and conditioning, anything that closely or not relate to tennis, I'm interested about. And I want to learn to better myself as a coach so that I can be of a better teacher for my own players. So, multiple aspects. It does take time and it is demanding if you do it regularly, but nonetheless, it's a great teaching tool for myself, my players, and great branding opportunity for the program and myself on a selfish standpoint as well.
I think it's a very interesting word that you use, branding, in terms of tennis, because in tennis, at least in the college sports community, it doesn't seem like there's that much acknowledgement unless you're a top 10 program or a powerhouse like USC, UCLA, Virginia, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Using Stetson as kind of your platform to not just increase your kids' abilities to be acknowledged, but everyone else's around you. How have you been using branding in a coaching standpoint for your players? Have you been trying to teach that as well as their game? How does that involve within your game of coaching?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. It's funny. I've started, let's talk about Instagram page. I've started it just purely for recruiting purposes. I think 2 years ago or something, which has been great. But what I realized, it goes much beyond recruiting. It goes into fan engagement. It goes into building a community around Stetson tennis here in DeLand and the greater Orlando area. And then it certainly goes into your point, which is promoting a message to our own players. We're big on culture, we're big on core values. And the only way to do that is to engage your own players in that process. So we have done a 10 weeks process where every week a player will send me a quote about one of our core value and what it means to them. And, we put it out there, we tag them, they repost and so forth. So they feel like they're part of the process. And then if we share videos of them playing, obviously we haven't played much competition this fall, unfortunately, but hopefully in the spring, you share clips, practice and so forth. There's still many ideas that I haven't had the chance to do, like a live practice sessions or those kind of activities where you can tag the players and then they feel incorporated into the process and start sharing themselves. And it's just another mean to, again, promote your culture through the players, have them engaged in that culture and participate in the culture. So social media, really hits on many fronts. And of course, has drawback, don't get me wrong, but certainly has massive benefits. And this generation especially, and when I say this generation, I'm very wide in the term, just that's the way they learn and that's the way they absorb information nowadays. So either you can, align yourself with their perspective or try to swim against the current. Well, I think the first approach is much easier.
So if in terms of all of this, you guys seem to be doing a very good job of not just promoting yourself and who you're interviewing, but your boys as well, training
Yeah.
videos, pump up videos, which is amazing. What would be the next step for you? What would you want to do with this Instagram page, or what would you
Yes.
see using social media for in terms of for college tennis for your
Yeah.
program?
No, I think that's great. I think the one aspect that I want to do more, and if we don't do it in the fall, we're certainly doing in the spring for sure, is actually promoting from an internal perspective what we do on a daily basis. I think
Okay.
there's misconception of what practice should look like or may look like, misconception about what a day of a student athlete look like. So I'm really looking forward to do some Instagram live where we just live stream our practice, where we do a story where we maybe a story of each exercise we do throughout the entire practice. We just post that on our stories on Instagram, just really giving a look of internally what we do. And some coaches could be thinking, well, I don't want to give out my secret sauce, so to speak. Well, I realize there's no such thing as secret sauce. I think at the end of the day, it's not a matter of the blueprint. It's a matter of how you execute the blueprint.
Okay.
I could give you the blueprint. It doesn't mean that you will be able to execute it. Or if I take the blueprint from another coach, does not mean that I'll be able to do it as well. I think it's a matter of executing it. So I don't think we should have any fears, us coaches, sharing our knowledge, sharing our blueprint, whatever it's worth, because I think the real mastery comes from executing the blueprint and adapting the blueprint on a daily basis. So really broadcasting from an internal standpoint what we do on a daily basis, and almost I think if you push that to the max level, almost broadcast it from the struggle as well. It's not always easy. There's not always perfect days. There's a lot of adaptation that needs to happen, and almost wish we could do a kind of somebody follows us on a daily basis and captures in video. Okay, great.
I'll do it. I'll do it.
Yeah, capture on a daily basis what happens, and in 1 minute snap of the day, the good, the bad, the very good, the very bad, and the in between. The life and struggle of a student athlete and the life and struggle of a collegiate tennis program. I think it's fascinating, but we have to do a better job sharing that information to the outside.
And you were talking about the blueprint, your college tennis philosophy for each coach. You said that not everyone, you can give them all the tools that they need, but they can't execute them. Yeah. Where did you learn to coach, or how did this come about? Because you've been with the program for 9 years, 6 as a head coach.
Yeah.
And so how did this come about? Where did you learn your coaching philosophy for these kids?
Trial and errors.
Okay.
I think at the end of the day, obviously you learn the X's and O's through, teaching convention, through the books, through just teaching certifications over the years. I've been teaching since I'm 16 years old, certified in France, where I'm from originally, certified here in the US through multiple organizations. But those are great premise. That's the base, so to speak. But you're not building a house, you're just building a foundation of knowledge. And then from there, I think how to execute, there's not a book that actually will provide you that. It's just life experience. You go out there on the court and you try things out, and sometimes it's a disaster, and sometimes it works extremely well, much better than you anticipated. And then you do it again the next day and it's the opposite. And you're like, well, why, right? It's the same exercise. Well, maybe the players did not wake up the same way. Maybe the players was tired from the day before. Maybe the player was overly stressed from, eczema, from not sleeping, from not eating well, So I think that's when adapting the blueprints really becomes an art, much more than a science, because you start understanding your player. You start trying to figure out when you need to, pat them on the shoulder and when you need to, give them a kick in the butt. And I think I really summarize it as the art of coaching. There's the science of coaching, that you learn in books, and that is crucial. Don't get me wrong, you must have it. If not, you're just basically, guessing what you're doing out there on the tennis court. But once you have the science, now it becomes about execution. And that's much more of an art. So trial and errors. I certainly believe I'm a better coach today than I was 6 months ago, than I was a year ago, just because you keep trying new things, and they're not drastically different anymore. Maybe year 1 to year 2, you go from A to Z all of a sudden. But then after that, you kind of, fine tune the process. But certainly, yeah, I mean, you have good days, you have bad days, you go to bed, you learn, and the next day you try again. But that's experience that comes into play.
So the amount of experience really does play, not the biggest part, but one of the biggest parts, you're saying, for coaches or people trying to learn like yourself every day. Because for me, when I first tried volunteering I was a volunteer assistant coach for a D1 school here in Connecticut.
Yeah.
The hardest part for me, at least, was how do you coach different people? And I think with that, I definitely needed more time, because I was right out of college and I was still learning kind of to be in that leadership role.
Yeah.
So I think it also comes down to time. Wouldn't you agree? Just time and experience to help you build these relationships.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And self-assessment. I mean, I go to bed every night looking back on my day and realizing and thinking about what I could have done better. And it's quite a stressful mindset. Don't get me wrong. It's not, I don't necessarily leave the office and, pick it right back the next day. I mean, it's always in the back of your mind. Okay, what can I do better? Why did I say that was right? What did I say that, okay, if I were to do it again, I say it slightly different. So it's constantly self-assessment. I think what is hard for a young coach, and I certainly still a young coach, but I was even younger when I started. I was 25 when I first became a head coach, which was very young at the time. You got to try and impose yourself. And at the beginning, you do it in a very, in a very rough kind of way where you don't necessarily exactly know who you are, first of all, as a person. So it's hard to know who you are as a coach. But I think most important, try new things, try to establish yourself, try to stand on your own 2 feet for the entirety of the practice, and realize you're probably going to fail. But at some point, you got to jump into the pool and you got to learn how to swim, right? So I think as a young coach, my only advice is go out there and try things out. Trying to be a tough guy one day, try to be a nice guy another day, try to figure out based on who you are, what works best for you, so that you become a better person and you become a better coach because you understand who you are, and the players also understand who you are. So try things out, be in a program that always has your back, always allows you to try new things, and then figure out, okay, I'm more like this, I'm more like that, and therefore my coaching philosophy will align with who I am and what I believe in as a person. But trial and errors, my friend. I don't think there's a better way to learn than just trying things out and feeling that, hey, if I fail, it's okay. It's not life or death situation. I established that trust with my players. They will back me up and understand, as they do. I mean, certainly they're in the process of getting themselves better as well.
It just seems crazy to me that it doesn't not hurt, but when you try so many things all at once, it can, for me, that sounds like it would confuse a player, right? So how would you, I'm trying to learn this for myself as we speak, because it seems that it's not necessarily confusing them. It's just the trial of, okay, if they react this way to my certain coaching philosophy, maybe I can get more out of them on the court, right?
No, I mean, especially you were asking me what to do when you're a young coach, when you first start. And I think with years of experience, you start making only smaller adjustments. But at the beginning, I think the spectrum of your adjustment will be very wide, just because you just don't know yourself that well, right? I mean, when you first start, you could be 22, 25. Well, you're still learning to adapt to your own skin, learning to identify what what is your character, what is your personality, right? So I think it's important that at the beginning you try things out. You really do. And because, you know, you could talk to a coach and that coach is going to be very old school, very abrupt. You're going to talk to another coach that is very much about collaboration. And then you kind of listening left and right, like, okay, well, which one works better, right? Both had results. The only way to figure that out is try it out. And after a few months, then you really start, okay, the spectrum was that big, now the spectrum is here, right? And then every year after that, it becomes tougher and tougher, but you're starting to reduce the spectrum because you understand yourself better, you understand what you believe in, and you understand your own players much quicker and faster and more precisely. So at the beginning, again, I mean, go try things out. And it does not have to be in your program always. It can be a summer camp. It can be, hey, go teach, you know, 1 week, I don't know if you have the opportunity, depending on compliance, in another environment, you know, 1 month in another country. So you get to experience different ways, you hear different approaches, and you build your own philosophy and your own values as you go along. But at the beginning, yeah, you're going to make the widest spread of mistake because you got to figure yourself out as a person and as a coach.
I 100% agree. And I think that couldn't be more well said than how you just put it. I think from that, you also have to look at not necessarily the negatives, but from a coaching standpoint, what are your don'ts from a head coach? Because while you're still young and while you've seen to experiment in different, like you said, trial and errors, what's one thing that you stay away from the most as a head coach, or when you're trying to teach someone? Is there something that we should stay away from, or someone should not focus on as much as what you've been saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's many factors. I think if we talked about philosophy to teaching, I think what we will call the old school kind of way, I think is slowly dying, and probably for right reason, because, you know, that was probably the closest that will lead to verbal abuse, that will lead to a very aggressive approach to teaching. So I think, you know, collaboration has to be there much more now than ever before. I think the tennis players of this generation want to have their own personality and approach part of the process. They want to be asked their opinion. They want to provide their feedback. They will certainly challenge you and ask you a lot of whys, compared to maybe older generation that will, hey, you're the coach, I'm going to do it exactly the way you asked me to, because that's just the way it is. Now there's a lot more question being asked. So I think as a coach, you have to be willing to listen. You got to be willing to ask. You got to be willing also to, you know, draw the lines, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you're the coach, they're the players. I mean, there's a role identification there that needs to happen where, okay, we communicate, but I make the final decision, and that decision has to be aligned in the sand that we cannot cross. I think also you're talking about the don'ts compared to before. Obviously, it seems obvious, but it's still happening. Sometimes you sit left and right. Verbal abuse just cannot happen anymore, right? And in tennis, it's not as common, but if you go and observe a football practice, well, you will hear things that like, okay, well, it's football, it's okay. Well, okay, we can discuss that actually, if it's really okay. So you cannot transplant that perspective onto a tennis court. I think that will get you thrown out and fired very, very quickly to this day.
100%.
I think you're talking about the don'ts. I think you must lead by example more now than ever. I think that the player are not going to give you multiple chances in a sense where, let's say you're late once, okay, well, it happens, okay? But if you're late every other practice, yourself as a coach, and you expect them to be there at the right time and doing the right thing, well, they're not going to let that go. Or if you let yourself go as a person and you're not physically in shape or whatnot, well, they'll be very quick to point that out, right? So I think you must hold yourself to a higher standard now than ever before, in my opinion, and for the right reason. I think that's all great. But the players now are very demanding, because they're being used to ask, they're being used to provide their opinion, and they're being used to, well, for things to go their way, which sometimes is the wrong approach. I'm not a fan of that, but they certainly don't want to be just told what to do, never provide feedback, and just yes sir kind of approach. That is kind of dying down, and we have to understand that and adapt and approach much more from a collaborative perspective.
I agree. And I think that also makes me think about when kids transfer, or when they first make a decision to go to college, when they first decide, okay, this is where I want to spend my 4 years. And then once they start getting used to the practice, it becomes an issue of, okay, maybe this is not what I wanted. Maybe this is not the coach that I wanted. How do you deal with someone that, okay, this is not the environment that I wanted and I want to transfer, or you get someone to transfer to your school? How does that, from what you've said, does that play a part in the coaches or the school? How does that make you feel as a coach when someone transfers from you or towards you?
Yeah. I mean, I think every coach has their share of transfers, transfer in, transfer out. I think it's tough, obviously, emotionally, when you have people leaving your program. If you felt that there was a disconnect, if you felt that you were not able to work it out, sometimes it's for the best, just because it's just obviously not working. It's like being in a bad relationship. At some point, it's better to break it off than try to always patch things up and it's clearly not working. I think what I realized over the years, and I've made some mistakes, don't get me wrong, is you got to be very upfront in explaining who you are as a person, your coaching philosophy, and what will happen as they come to your program. The kind of practice, the kind of standards they will face, the kind of expectations that you're putting in place. And obviously you can't, foresee the future, but you certainly have to kind of give, brush a fairly accurate picture of what their experience is going to be, by being very honest about what you will put in place as a head coach. And if you're telling them it's going to be like this, but then it becomes this, well, okay, like, where you lying, where you wrong, what happened? But if you tell them it's going to be like this and it's slightly like this, then it's fine, right? Because you cannot foresee everything. So I think being very honest about how things will be dealt with, how things will be run on a daily basis, your standards, your expectations, and being okay with somebody telling you, it's not for me, or you telling someone, I don't think you're responding well to our values, and therefore I don't think the program is going to be right for you. Okay. So the more you have exchange with the players, with the parents, with the coaches, the more you see them, the more you can, understand if there will be a good fit or not. Obviously, certain people lie, but, over the years, you kind of figure it out where the truth lays. So being honest, being very honest, very upfront, and being okay with who you are, understanding, well, it may not please everybody, but that's what I believe in, and I'm not going to change for you, right? We can compromise on certain little things. That's okay. That's relationships. But I'm not going to change who I am as a person or how I see things and what I believe in because you don't share those values, right? Yeah. You have your set of values. That's okay. I have my set of values. If they're drastically opposites, that's not going to work. But if they're right next to each other or close by, we can make it work. That's okay. So exposing who you are and making sure that the person does the same to you.
It's interesting how you say when it gets that close that you can eventually find a way to work it out. But has it ever been for you? Has there ever been an experience when you've been that close where it just completely exploded or just went completely wrong?
Like you were sharing values and belief and you were too close and actually you did not work it out. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, because it seems like like when you're this, what you said, it was this far apart, but then when you get this far close, you maybe be a little bit farther apart, but you still can figure out a way to work together. Has there ever been one where it was initially, okay, this is going to work, and then by the end of it or in the middle of it, it went wrong or didn't go as planned?
Uh, Honestly, no, I don't think so, because
Wow.
I think if you expose yourself very openly at the beginning, and you have a shared values and shared language, almost, I want to say, then you will be able to work through everything. There will be disconnect, there will be moments of tension, but because you have a shared belief, you have a shared goal, or you have a shared purpose, you will work it out. And I don't know if you're married, but I am.
No.
And okay, so it will happen for you one day. And I think marriage is the same thing. I think
Okay.
you married someone that has a shared values and shared belief with you, so that when you're faced with adversity, and you will be faced with adversity in a marriage, well, you work it out, and you work it out because you're not that far apart at the end of the day. Yes, it sounds like, oh no, I don't want this, I want that, and it sounds dramatically opposite. But at the end of the day, if you really peel off the layers, you realize, well, no, we're not that far off. I can make a step toward you, you make a step toward me, and we're good. And I think players, coaches, relationship are similar. If you have a common goal, if the player came for the right reason, if you hold them to the same standard consistently, there will be moments of tension, especially in men's program, because men tend to argue more and tend to kind of push the boundaries a little bit more than ladies. You will be able to work it out. You will just step in an office and talk it out and be like, hey, are we really that far apart here? And the answer most of the time is no. So I think if the shared common values are there and belief, you can work out through everything, I believe. But if you don't believe in the same thing to start with, now I think you're delusional, because you're not talking the same language whatsoever.
I agree. And I think that's one way we can perfectly end this interview. So I really appreciate you coming on to our channel. Is there anything you would like to shout out, talk about before we leave? You guys, if you're watching this or listening to this, please follow Stetson Tennis. This is a really fun account for you guys to listen and just be a part of, because you guys are doing a lot of great stuff down there. And I hope you guys the best of success, especially during these hard times. So thank you again for coming on.
Yeah. No, I think that was great. Phil, I appreciate it. And I think at the end of the day, we need to learn in tennis to share our knowledge, to share our experiences, and not thinking that somebody will steal it from me and take my job or whatnot. No, I think at the end of the day, we're all in the same business, we're in the same industry. Times are tough for all of us, and we need to really get closer to one another in the tennis industry, and your podcast and pages and social media interactions are doing that, connecting us with one another, sharing our knowledge, sharing our experiences, and at the end of the day, making our players better, right? Because we all,
100%.
that's what we do. We are teachers of the game, and our job is to make our players better. So thank you for having me, and talking tennis today. It was a lot of fun.
No, this was a lot of fun, so I really appreciate it. Make sure to go follow him and his team down below in the description. I hope to see you guys again. And Chris, I hope I have you on here again sometime in the future when you're super successful there. I really hope we can do that again.
Anytime.
Thank you so much.
Anytime.
Take care and stay safe.
Bye-bye.
Bye.